It happened on a cold December morning in 1963. A 5-year-old girl stood in a quiet house in Pontiac, Michigan, watching as her mother slipped away. Not suddenly, not peacefully, but slowly, terribly, eaten alive by breast cancer at just 30 years old. And in that moment, something inside that little girl cracked open. A wound so deep it would never fully heal, and a fire so fierce it would never stop burning. Her name was Madonna Louise Ciccone, and she shared that name with the woman she had just lost. "You walk around with a big hole inside you," she would later say, a feeling of emptiness and longing. For the Ciccone family, 6 children now being raised by a grieving father in a strict Catholic household, the rules were absolute. Obedience, piety, conformity. Madonna Louise Veronica Ciccone was the third of 6, the eldest daughter, the namesake of the dead, which meant she inherited not just a name, but an impossible burden: to be perfect, to be the example, to fill the void left behind. "I know my father put a great deal more pressure on her to be our guide," her brother Christopher would later recall. "She was our mother's namesake." But Madonna had other plans. From the outside, she looked like a good Catholic girl: short skirts, long hair, a smile that could charm anyone. On the inside, she was already planning her escape. She had seen her mother die young. She had watched her father remarry a housekeeper named Joan, adding 2 more children to the already chaotic household. She had learned one brutal, unforgivable lesson: there are no guarantees. Death comes without warning, so there is only one rational response: live, consume, conquer. Madonna would later admit that losing her mother became the engine of her entire existence. "I became very obsessed with death, and the idea that you never know when death will arrive. So one has to do as much as possible all the time to get the most out of life," she told David Blaine. That would be a motivating force. Think about that for a moment. A 5-year-old loss transformed into a 40-year rampage of ambition. While other teenage girls dreamed of marriage and babies, Madonna dreamed of a single thing: ruling the world. In 1974, at 15 years old, she attended her first concert, David Bowie at Cobo Arena in Detroit. And something clicked. Standing in that crowd, watching a man who had turned himself into an alien, an androgynous creature from another planet, she recognized herself for the first time. "I recognized myself in him somehow," she said, "and he gave me license to dream a different future for myself." This is the moment the old Madonna died and the new one was born. The one who would not be limited by gender, by genre, by expectation, by anything. Because here was a man who had said, "I can become anything I imagine." And Madonna, who had already learned that life is a race against death, heard that message and ran with it. But on a warm July morning in 1978, a 19-year-old woman ignored her father's protests and boarded her first ever flight. Destination: New York City. Assets: exactly $35. Backup plan: none. According to pop legend, when she stepped out of the taxi at LaGuardia, she told the driver, "Take me to the center of everything." He dropped her in Times Square, which, in 1978, was not the sanitized tourist attraction you see today. It was the armpit of New York. Porn theaters, drug dealers, pimps, danger around every corner. Exactly the kind of place a good Catholic girl from the suburbs should have run from. Madonna ran toward it. "I felt like I plugged my finger into an electric socket," she recalled decades later. But the reality of New York was not the glamorous fantasy she had sold herself. It was freezing winters and unheated apartments. It was working at Dunkin' Donuts, where, depending on who you believe, she was either fired for squirting jelly in a customer's face or simply couldn't handle the pressure. It was posing nude for art photographers, earning $25 an hour, knowing those images would haunt her forever. "I was expected to feel ashamed when these photos came out, and I was not," she would later tell a stunned audience. And this puzzled people. And then there was the rape. At knife point, dragged to the roof of a building in her first year in the city. A trauma she carried silently for decades before revealing it in a Harper's Bazaar essay. "New York wasn't everything I thought it would be," she wrote. And yet, and this is crucial to understanding Madonna, she has said that losing her mother was still worse. That everything she endured in that brutal city, all the hunger and fear and violation, still paled next to the emptiness left by that December morning in 1963. This is not a woman who breaks. This is a woman who has been broken so early that nothing can break her again. For 2 years, she hustled. She studied dance with Alvin Ailey and Martha Graham, the giants of American modern dance. She joined bands, The Breakfast Club, Emmy and the Emmys, learning to play drums and guitar from a boyfriend named Dan Gilroy in a converted synagogue in Queens. She was offered a ticket to Paris, signed to a production deal, put up in luxury hotels, and she walked away. Because the songs they wanted her to sing weren't hers. I realized the only person who could take me where I wanted was myself, she later said. So she pounded the pavement. She pushed her demos into the hands of anyone who would listen. She found her way to a DJ named Mark Kamens, who played her track, Everybody, at the legendary club Danceteria. And Kamens, in turn, brought her demo to a man named Seymour Stein, the head of Sire Records, who was lying in a hospital bed recovering from heart surgery. Stein listened to the tape. Then he demanded to meet her from his hospital bed. And when the young woman walked into that room, bold, hungry, utterly convinced of her own destiny, Stein saw something he had rarely encountered in his decades in the business. The drive, the zeal, the ruthlessness, he later recalled. He signed her on the spot. Madonna Louise Ciccone, the girl who arrived in New York with $35 and a death wish disguised as ambition, had just taken her first step toward becoming Madonna. July 27, 1983. Her self-titled debut album is released, and the critics are unimpressed. Rolling Stone calls her voice irritating as hell. But here's the thing about critics, they don't own the dance floor. And in the clubs of New York, Holiday is becoming an anthem. Borderline climbs the charts. By 1984, she has her first top 10 hit. By 1985, she has 3. By 1986, she is everywhere. But it is one performance that changes everything. September 14, 1984, the very first MTV Video Music Awards. Madonna appears on stage in a white lace wedding dress, a boy toy belt buckle around her waist, fishnet stockings, and then she drops to the floor, rolls around, simulates something that looks suspiciously like pleasure, all while singing a song called Like a Virgin. America did not know what hit it. For the first time, a female pop star was not performing innocence or coy romance. She was performing unapologetic desire, and the audience had never seen anything like it. But here's what most people don't understand about that moment. Madonna wasn't just being provocative for the sake of it. She was playing a character. The entire performance, the wedding dress, the belt, the writhing, was a critique of the virgin/whore dichotomy that had trapped women for centuries. How can she be wearing a wedding dress and acting like that? That's the point. She's asking the question. Whether the audience understood the subtext or not, they bought the record. Like a Virgin hit #1 and stayed for 6 weeks. Her second album sold over 7 million copies. She was no longer a one-hit wonder. She was a phenomenon. The Material Girl video, where she parodies the gold-digging stereotype even as the world takes it literally. The marriage to bad boy actor Sean Penn on a California clifftop, vows drowned out by the roar of paparazzi helicopters. The performance at Live Aid 1985, introduced by Bette Midler as a woman who pulled herself up by her bra straps and has been known to let them down occasionally. By 1986, True Blue reaches #1 in 12 countries. She is the first lady of pop. She is selling out stadiums. She is on magazine covers, film screens, the covers of national newspapers. She has done what she set out to do in that taxi cab 7 years ago. She has reached the center of everything. And yet, she is not satisfied. Because Madonna has never been interested in merely arriving. She is interested in destroying the map and drawing a new one. And that is exactly what she did next. In the spring of 1989, Madonna released a song, a gospel-infused, confessional pop masterpiece that she had co-written with Patrick Leonard. It was called Like a Prayer, and it was, by any measure, her most personal work yet, a meditation on faith, loss, and the ecstasy of transcendence. But no one talked about the music. They talked about the video. The video opens in a church. A young woman witnesses a murder. A black man is arrested for the crime. She prays to a statue of a black saint, which comes to life. She kisses him. She dances in front of burning crosses. She receives the stigmata, wounds of Christ appearing on her hands, while singing about the rapture of religious devotion. The Vatican was not amused. Italian Roman Catholic historian Roberto de Mattei called it a blasphemy and insult because it shows immorals inside a church. The Vatican urged Christians to boycott her upcoming Blonde Ambition tour. Pepsi, which had paid her $5 million to use the song in a commercial, canceled the contract after just one airing. Madonna, for her part, was surprised, not by the backlash, but by its ferocity. "I knew that we were pushing some big buttons," director Mary Lambert later told Rolling Stone. "But I sort of underestimated the influence and bigotry of fundamentalist religion and racism in this country and the world." But here's what happened next. The controversy didn't kill her career. It fueled it. Like a prayer, went straight to #1. The album topped the charts. The Blonde Ambition tour sold out arenas around the globe. And critics, for the first time, began using a word that had never been applied to her before: artist. Which brings us to 1990, the year Madonna released Vogue, a song born from the underground ballroom scene of Harlem, where queer Black and Latino performers vogued, striking poses like fashion models, in a dance-off for trophies and respect. Madonna took that subculture and blasted it into the global mainstream. The video, shot in black and white by director David Fincher, became an instant classic. Vogue hit #1 in over 30 countries. But the controversy didn't stop there. Later that year, she released Justify My Love, a song about a passionate hotel room encounter set to a trip-hop beat. The video featured nudity, sadomasochistic imagery, and a level of sexual frankness that MTV found unpalatable. They banned it. So Madonna did something unprecedented. She released the video as a music video single. It sold over 500,000 copies in its first week. Think about that. A woman, told by the industry that her work is too dangerous for television, simply sells it directly to her fans. At scale, profitably. Years before streaming, years before YouTube, years before anyone had even imagined the direct-to-consumer model that now powers the entire entertainment industry. Madonna invented it. And then, 2 years later, she went even further. October 1992, Madonna releases 2 projects simultaneously, an album called Erotica and a coffee table book titled Sex. The album, her 5th studio effort, explores themes of dominance, submission, obsession, and connection through an alter ego she calls Mistress Dita. The book, photographed by Stephen Meisel, features Madonna in various states of undress and sexual activity with models, porn stars, and celebrities including Isabella Rossellini and Naomi Campbell. The backlash was instantaneous and brutal. Conservatives declared her the harbinger of moral decay. The Vatican, for the second time, condemned her work. Warner Books printed 835,000 copies of Sex, the largest initial run for any illustrated book in publishing history. It sold out almost immediately, but the cultural cost was high. "Most people want to hear me say I regret putting out my sex book," Madonna later told Time. "I don't. What was problematic was putting out my erotica album at the same time. I love that record, and it was overlooked. Everything I did for the next 3 years was dwarfed by my book." And yet, looking back now, from a distance of 3 decades, we can see something that contemporary critics missed entirely. Erotica came out at the height of the AIDS crisis, when the queer community was being decimated and the government was doing nothing. Conservatives were using the epidemic to demonize gay men, portraying sex itself as a death sentence. And Madonna, who had built her career on a foundation of queer support, who had lost friends to the disease, who had watched the vibrant underground culture of her early years in New York being wiped out, responded not by retreating, but by celebrating. Erotica was not just a provocation. It was a political statement, a middle finger to the moral majority, a defiant declaration that queer joy could not be extinguished. She is responding to a couple of different things, says Professor Michael Danko. The larger cultural wars, the AIDS crisis. There's a real need for her core audience of queer listeners to celebrate a sexual culture that is also slipping away and that is under threat at this time. The album was her first not to top the US charts since her debut, but its influence would echo for decades, in everything from Beyoncé's unapologetic sexuality to Cardi B's raw explicitness. And then, true to form, Madonna reinvented herself again. In 1998, after becoming a mother, after studying Kabbalah, after taking a 4-year hiatus from pop, she released Ray of Light, a shimmering, introspective electronic masterpiece that bore almost no resemblance to the blunt force provocation of erotica. The critics who had spent years dismissing her as a manufactured pop product were forced to recalculate. Ray of Light won 3 Grammys. Rolling Stone called it one of the greatest albums ever made. In 2005, after the political misfire of American Life, which questioned the Iraq War at a time when questioning the Iraq War was commercially suicidal, she released Confessions on a Dance Floor. In 2005, after the political misfire of American Life, which questioned the Iraq War at a time when questioning the Iraq War was commercially suicidal, she released Confessions on a Dance Floor. And the world was dancing again. Hung Up, sampling ABBA's Gimme, 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 hit #1 in 41 countries. In 2019, at 61 years old, an age when most pop stars have long since retired to the nostalgia circuit, she released Madam X, an alter ego inspired by the Latin American revolutionary tradition, blending reggaeton, fado, and trap beats into something entirely new. 40 years, 14 studio albums, 20 top 10 hits, and through it all, one constant: change. Madonna really excels at showing us new and exciting parts of herself, the critic Sophie observed. She helped to invent the pop star era. And yet, for all her success, Madonna has never stopped being attacked. From her first MTV performance to her most recent tour, she has been called a whore, a blasphemer, a cultural appropriator, a has-been, a desperate attention seeker, a bad actress, a terrible singer, a manipulator of the media, and a woman who doesn't know when to stop. But here's what the critics never understood: the attacks were the point. Camille Paglia, the feminist scholar who wrote extensively about Madonna in the early 1990s, argued that Madonna had done more for feminism than any academic theorist. By refusing to be shamed, by taking control of her own image, by treating her body as a canvas rather than a battleground, she had modeled a new kind of female power. Madonna has taught young women to be fully female and sexual while still exercising total control over their lives, Paglia wrote. Not everyone agreed. Second-wave feminists dismissed her as a pawn of the male gaze. Cultural critics accused her of appropriating black and queer subcultures for commercial gain without giving back. Conservative commentators, from Tipper Gore to the Pope, condemned her as a corrupting influence on the nation's youth. But Madonna, raised in the crucible of her mother's death, had learned one thing early: nothing worth doing is safe from judgment. And she never asked for permission. "I know that some of my lack of inhibition comes from my mother's death," she told the Los Angeles Times in 1991. "Mothers teach you manners. And I absolutely did not learn any of those rules and regulations." She was raped. She was stalked by paparazzi who chased her car, her children, her marriages. She was divorced twice, publicly, painfully. She was body-shamed when she turned 40, 50, 60. She was told she was too old to wear a leotard, too old to dance on a stripper pole, too old to be a sex symbol, too old to matter. And each time, she responded the same way, by ignoring them and doing it anyway. In 2016, accepting Billboard's Woman of the Year award, she gave a speech that laid bare the double standard she had fought her entire career. "I was expected to feel ashamed when these photos came out, and I was not," she said, referencing those early nude photographs. And this puzzled people. She spoke about the sexism she faced, the ageism, the constant belittling of her intelligence and talent. And she ended with a simple declaration: "I'm standing before you as a woman who refuses to apologize." You cannot understand modern pop music without understanding Madonna. Every female pop star you love, every single one, owes her a debt she will never fully repay. Consider Beyoncé, the visual albums, the gender-bending performances, the unapologetic embrace of sexuality as power. Beyoncé has cited Madonna repeatedly as an influence, most explicitly on her 2022 album Renaissance, which resurrects the same queer ballroom culture that Madonna first brought to the mainstream in 1990. Consider Lady Gaga, the constant reinvention, the provocation of Catholic imagery, the theatrical live performances that blur the line between concert and art installation. Gaga has spent her entire career being compared to Madonna, comparisons she has sometimes bristled at, but comparisons that would not exist if Madonna had not first cleared the path. Nobody since Madonna has wielded celebrity so audaciously, wrote critic Robert Christgau. Consider Britney Spears. The schoolgirl outfit. The snake around her neck at the VMAs. The exploitation of her sexuality by a media machine that both consumed and condemned her. Britney walked a path Madonna had paved. But unlike Madonna, she did not have the same iron will to control her own narrative. And when Madonna kissed Britney on stage at the 2003 VMAs, she was not just creating a tabloid moment. She was acknowledging her heir while demonstrating the difference between them. Madonna was the architect of her own fame. Britney was its victim. Consider Christina Aguilera. Consider Miley Cyrus. Consider Rihanna. Consider Taylor Swift, who, after a decade of country pop innocence, reinvented herself as a reputation-less bad girl in an album whose title track sampled My Neck, My Back. Consider every pop star who has ever treated their career as a series of distinct eras with their own aesthetics, sounds, and personas. Madonna created the blueprint for modern pop stars, wrote trans pop icon Sophie. More than anyone else, Madonna created the rules of engagement now followed by everyone from Taylor Swift to Justin Timberlake, and Britney Spears to Beyoncé. She also proved that female pop artists could have total autonomy. There was no male Svengali pulling Madonna's strings. She produced her own albums, negotiated her own contracts, directed her own tours, built her own multimedia empire. By album 3, 1980 SIX's True Blue, she was co-producing every track. This might not seem revolutionary now, but in 1986, it was unheard of for a female pop singer. Dusty Springfield had been advised not to take production credits on songs she had produced, warned, "Don't be too smart or we won't love you." 2 decades later, Madonna obliterated that warning entirely. And then there is the LGBTQ+ community. At a time when Ronald Reagan's administration was actively ignoring the AIDS crisis, when gay men were being demonized as diseased predators, when being openly queer could cost you your job, your housing, your life, Madonna stood on stage and said, without flinching, "I love my gay fans. They saved my life." She brought voguing to the masses. She featured gay dancers, gay choreographers, gay collaborators in her work. She championed safe sex when the administration was silent. She defended a person's right to love whomever they want, and the space to be whoever they need to be, at a time when that defense was not popular. Amid the scourge of AIDS, she brought queer identities into the mainstream, writes biographer Mary Gabriel. Fiercely defending a person's right to love whomever and be whoever they wanted. There is a through line from Madonna's Express Yourself, a song about demanding respect from a lover, to Beyoncé's Flawless, which samples Nigerian writer Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie declaring, "We teach girls to shrink themselves." There is a through line from Madonna's Vogue, which celebrated the underground queer ballroom scene, to Lil Nas X's Montero, Call Me By Your Name, which explicitly queers hip-hop. There is a through line from Madonna's refusal to be slut-shamed by Penthouse magazine, to Megan Thee Stallion's Body and Doja Cat's Woman. The DNA of modern pop feminism, the insistence that women can be powerful, sexual, and in control, runs directly back to a woman from Bay City, Michigan, who arrived in New York with $35 and the audacity to demand more. Oh, where does she stand now? By any objective measure, Madonna is the most successful female recording artist in history. Over 300 million records sold worldwide. The best-selling solo singles artist in Billboard history, second only to the Beatles. 12 #1 hits on the Hot 100. 44 #1 singles on Billboard's Dance Club Songs chart. More than any other artist on any single Billboard chart. 20 MTV Video Music Awards, more than any other artist. But the numbers, impressive as they are, miss the point entirely. Madonna's legacy is not the albums she sold or the records she broke. Her legacy is the space she created. Before Madonna, female pop stars were expected to be one thing: demure, charming, uncontroversial. After Madonna, everything changed. She demonstrated that a woman could be a businesswoman and a provocateur, a mother and a sex symbol, a pop star and a political force, all at once. She showed that controversy was not something to be avoided, but something to be weaponized. She proved that aging was not the end of relevance, but the beginning of a new kind of power. And yet, and this is the part that makes her story so compelling, she has never rested on her legacy. In her 60s, she continues to tour, to record, to provoke. When she broke her hip on the Rebel Heart Tour in 2015, she finished the show before seeking medical attention. When she collapsed from a bacterial infection in 2023, requiring intensive care and nearly dying, she returned to the stage months later, opening her celebration tour with the words, "A few months ago, I was in a coma. And when I woke up, the first thing I thought was, I need to finish this tour." That's the thing about Madonna. She never stops. She can't stop, because stopping would mean facing the hole her mother left behind. And as long as she's moving, as long as she's creating, as long as she's fighting, she doesn't have to look into that darkness. She can keep running, and running, and running. She once said that losing her mother taught her that death is always coming. So you have to get the most out of life, right now, in this moment, without hesitation. I've turned my knee onto the world and said, okay, I don't have a mother to love me. I'm going to make the whole world love me. And she did. For 40 years, the world has loved her, hated her, worshipped her, condemned her, consumed her, and tried to bury her. And for 40 years, she has refused to die. Not her career, not her relevance, not her spirit. Because Madonna learned something at 5 years old that most people never learn at all. Life is not a dress rehearsal. You don't get to do it over. So you better make every single second count. The girl from Michigan with the dead mother's name and the world-conquering ambition arrived in New York in 1978 with $35 and a taxi driver who dropped her in the worst part of town. She walked into that darkness without flinching. She built an empire from nothing. She fought every battle, silenced every critic, shattered every glass ceiling, and paved the way for every woman who would follow. And today, she is still here, still dancing, still fighting, still refusing to apologize. Because Madonna does not bow. Madonna does not break. Madonna endures.
Michael is gone. Tupac is gone. Prince is gone. Whitney is gone. Amy Winehouse is gone. David Bowie is gone. But I'm still standing.